This is the lovely baby doll dress we're going to be making today.
Now, so the very first step in making our baby doll dress is to cut out our pattern pieces, our fabric. So the first piece of fabric I'm cutting out here is our giant bow for the front of the dress, and this is going to be cut twice on the folded edge. And then we're going to move on to the straps for our dress. So this is going to be cut out 4 times in total on the fold for our 2 straps at the top of the dress. Then we're going to move on to the bow overlay, which is the rectangle, and that's just going to be cut out once on one piece of fabric, and that is going to be our bow overlay. And then we're going to move on to the front and the back of the dress. They're both going to be cut on fold, and we're going to cut one of the main fabric and then one of our lining fabric. That's for both the front and the back of the dress. So here we have the front section of our dress, and we're cutting this out on the folded edge, and we're going to be cutting this out once on the main fabric and then once on our lining fabric. And then once we have all of our pattern pages cut out, we are going to start sewing our dress together. And then finally here we are cutting out the front of the dress on our lining fabric and cutting this on fold, on the folded edge again.
Now, so here we have our back dress piece, and then here we have our front dress piece. We have the lining and then the main fabric. And then here we have our straps. So you should have 4 straps cut out in total. Here we have our bow fabric. So we have 2 larger rectangles, and that's cut out twice. And then here is going to be our bow middle overlay. So that's just a rectangle there. So that is all of our fabric now cut out, and we can start sewing. Now, so the first step for our baby doll dress is going to be to sew our large oversized bow. So what I've done here is placed the 2 kind of rectangles that I've cut out directly on top of each other. My fabric is the same on both sides, but if you have a certain side of your fabric that is the good side, you want to make sure that those 2 sides are on the inside and facing each other. And then what we're going to do is match them up perfectly evenly all the way around, and then pin them in place. And we're going to sew around the corners, but we want to make sure to leave a gap right here at the center, so that we can then, once we've sewn around the edges and we leave the gap open, we can flip it inside out and have the nice side facing out. So I'm just going to sew from the corner, making sure everything is lined up nicely. Now I'm going to sew all the way around the edges, leaving a single gap open here at the bottom. Now, so here we have our gap. So what I'm going to do now is reach in to the corner and grab the corner and use this to pull this through. Now, so this is the bow here. It gives us a rough idea of what our bow is going to look like. So we still need to press down our seams and close this opening here, but we're just going to put this to the side for a minute, and then we'll press our seams in place. The next thing we're going to do is our straps. We have 4 cutouts in total, and what we're going to do is place together, one on top of each other, and then just line them up evenly. And then what we can do is pin them in place, and then we can sew along the sides, leaving the open edge at the top and at the bottom here. So we're just going to pin down the sides here. So once that's pinned in place, we're going to sew along the 2 sides, leaving about half a centimetre seam allowance and back stitch at the start and at the end. We're leaving this end open. Next thing I'm going to do is grab a safety pin and place it on the side here. What I do then is turn it into the gap here in the opening, turn the safety pin inwards, and then what we're going to do is turn this inside out. So we're going to use the safety pin to ruche up the fabric and then pull it over.
Pull the fabric over the safety pin and then ruche the safety pin down through the fabric. And then we can just cut off our excess seams here, and then repeating the very same process for our second strap, sewing down the sides of the fabric, cutting off our excess seams, and then gliding our safety pin through the opening and ruching the fabric over the safety pin until it's turned inside out and we have our strap finished. And then we want to press our two straps in place and do a top stitch on top.
Now, so the next thing I've done is just fold my two straps in half and then press them in place. So now I'm just going to sew straight down the edge here just to close this in place, and I'm going to go as close to the edge as possible. So there we have our two straps done there, and they're sewn perfectly. So here we have the bow overlay cover for the middle section. So I've just folded it in half and I'm going to sew along the side here, leaving about half a centimetre seam allowance. So that's...
And we can also turn this inside out once we've sewn the side seam.
The next thing I'm going to do is do a gathering stitch at the top of our front dress piece. So I'm going to do this gathering stitch just maybe from here to about here. So I'm just changing the stitch width to 5.0 on my sewing machine to make it longer. And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do about half a centimetre seam allowance, and making sure to not do a front and back stitch at the start and the end, and just sewing straight through. So no front and back stitch there. And then I'm going to leave a good bit of thread at the end here so that I can pull it through. So what I'm going to do now is separate our thread here and then just take one side of it and pull it to ruche through all the way along. And the same on this side, separating our two threads and pulling it. So there we have kind of our ruche detailing at the top, and we're going to do the very same to the lining
Fabric.
So this is our front lining, and I'm going to do the very same here. Now what we're going to do is place both the main fabric and the lining for the front dress piece on top of each other, and we're just going to spread out this kind of gathering thread so that the length is even on both sides. So I'm just going to join up directly here at the edges and just pull the excess thread out there. I'm going to just pin all the way along the top neckline here, the top. So there we have the top of our dress pinned together with the lining, the main fabric and the lining. And now to add in my straps. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm just going to make little openings here, and I'm going to add in the straps. So we want to make sure that the good side of the strap is facing towards the good sides of the fabric. And what I've done there is place 2 pins in the exact sections where I want to add my straps. So on my actual pattern, I will have markings as to where the straps are meant to go onto the front top piece, and wherever those markings are is where you should make an incision in your fabric so that you know that that is where you are to add your straps. So then I'm going to take my strap here, make sure the good side of the strap is facing the good side of my fabric here, and then I'm going to insert edge of my strap through that hole, and then I'm going to pin this in place here. Very good. And then I'm going to do the very same on this side. I'm going to grab my strap, make sure the good side of my strap is facing the good side
Main fabric.
so the main fabric, and then I'm going to insert my strap here.
So just before you sew your straps in place, you just want to double check the measurement from the edge of the strap to the edge of the front dress piece and just make sure it's even on both sides.
Perfect. So then I'm going to now sew over my 2 straps, but before I do that, I'm just going to double check that the strap is okay on this side in terms of placement. So this one just needs to be moved ever so slightly to this side.
Another important thing to check is the side of your strap that has the top stitch, because you want this to be facing out. So when I flipped over my dress to check, it was facing inwards. So I'm just going to take these out and swap them around. So that's why it's beneficial to double check before you secure your straps in place.
Now I'm just going to double check this again. Yeah, so that's on the right side there, so that's perfect. Yeah, so now I can secure this in place. Now I'm going to sew all the way along here, which is like the neckline, and I'm just going to make sure that when I sew, I'm sewing below the gather stitch, and make sure to put your sewing machine back to the normal stitch length after doing the gathering stitch. Yeah, so I'm just going to flip this around to see how it looks. Yeah, so there we have the lovely front of our dress. Now, so here we have the lining for the back of our dress, and what I've just done with the bottom edge is I have folded it up 1 centimeter at a time, so 2 centimeters all together, and then I've just pressed this in place. So now I'm just going to sew this in place before we attach it to the main fabric of the back dress piece. So now we're going to attach this to the main fabric of our back dress piece. So I'm just going to make sure the good side of the fabric is facing me, and then I'm going to make sure the good side of our lining is facing that. And then before I pin this together at the top, I'm going to insert our straps, and according to our pattern there's going to be 2 markings as to where on the fabric you want to place your straps. So there'll be 2 markings on the pattern, and that's where we'll make 2 incisions here. So I'm just going to grab my pattern and double check where the incisions are meant to be. So the straps are meant to be placed about 17 centimeters from the edge, and this is because when we add our elastic it's going to scrunch up the fabric like that. So for the time being I'm just going to measure out 17 centimeters is about here, and that's just going to be my marking there as to where I want to make sure I insert my straps, and then I'm going to do the very same on this side. So 17 here. So then I'm going to grab my straps from here, and I'm going to make sure the good side of the front dress piece is facing this, and then I'm going to grab the straps like this. So facing upwards should be the lining of the dress, and then facing to the back side of the dress piece should be the good fabric. So then I'm going to take my straps, I'm going to insert them underneath the lining section here, up through here like so, then pin this in place here. And we're going to pin all the way along the top here. And we're going to do the very same with our strap here. So before I sew this in place, I'm just going to flip it around to make sure and test that the strap lengths are okay for me. So this is something that you can adjust yourself. You might want to pull them forward a little bit more to make it the right kind of size for you. So I'm just going to test this length and then I may make adjustments after. So here when I flip it around, we have the two bad sides on the outside, and then I can flip it like so, and the two good sides. So I'm going to test this strap length, what's it like on me and where the dress sits, and then I'll secure the straps in place once I'm happy with their length. So now that we have secured our straps in place, we're going to sew all the way across here, straight line. And then I'm just going to close this raw seam with my serger in due course. So now I'm just going to press this seam in place, and then my next step is going to be to add in the elastic for the back here. So I'm just going to use this thread of elastic, and then I'm going to be sewing a straight line all the way across here, and in that straight line I'm going to feed my elastic through, and that's going to make a ruche detailing at the back and just secure our dress to us. So I'm just going to press this seam in place. Now for sewing our line where we're going to add in the elastic, I'm just going to do is pin this in place from the top, and this is going to be my guide to sew my straight line all the way across. So I'm just going to pin this in place here, and then this is going to be the guide so that I sew a perfectly straight line all the way across, as this will be the width of our elastic, and it will ensure that our elastic is able to fit through and see through the gap. So now this is going to be my guide to sew a straight line that is then going to be used to feed in our elastic. So I'm just going to sew this in place now. So there we have our line. So now what I'm going to do is flip our dress around. There we have our very neat line sewn in. So now what I'm going to do is add a safety pin to the top of my elastic and feed it through that gap. And then once the elastic reaches the end on this side, I'm just going to pin it in place, and then we'll continue feeding it through. So our next step is going to be to secure our elastic in place on the back. So what I'm just going to do, where I've pinned the elastic at the very edge, I'm just going to sew back and forth a couple of times to secure this in place, and I'm going to do the very same on this side. Now the next thing I'm going to do is sew the top of our bow to our strap here. So what I've just done is measure it equally on both sides. So there should be about 7 centimeters of fabric from the edge of the strap to the end here of the bow. And then I've just secured this in place. And what I'm going to do is just sew a neat line directly across from where the bow is on top of the strap. So directly across there, and then I've done the very same on this side. So it's exactly 7 centimeters from the outside of the strap, and then I'm just going to sew this in place, small line there. So it's going to be a slightly diagonal, and we'll sew back and forth twice. Yeah, so there we have it. So it is exactly 7 centimeters from the edge of our strap. and then it's the same on side, 7 centimeters. Now our next step, since we've secured that in place, is to flip that up, and we want to now sew our bow overlay in place. So what we're going to do here is take the top layer of the main fabric and position our overlay like this. It is exactly 5 centimeters from the top, and I've measured this to be in the middle. It's, yes, exactly 5 centimeters from the top of our dress, where the lining and the main fabric connect at the neckline there, and it's directly in the middle between each strap. So to measure exactly in the middle, it is 13 centimeters for me, and the way that I've done my gathering. So it's about 13 centimeters from this strap and 13 centimeters from this strap, and then I've just measured directly down so that it's exactly in the middle. And then I always encourage you just to check this yourself as well by pulling it over, flipping it, and having a look to make sure that it looks even on both sides. Yeah, so then our next step is going to be to secure this in place. So you can see here I just overlocked the edges of my bow overlay, so you can do that as well. So now I'm going to take the top layer of the main fabric, and I'm going to just sew a straight line across here. And then to secure the overlay in place, what I'm actually going to do is open up our top gathering here, just for the small section, and then I'm going to slide in the overlay through, and then I'll restitch this just so it's really nice and neat finish at the top. But for the minute, I'm just going to sew this in place and secure it. So I'm just sewing it to the main fabric on top. So I'm just going to sew this quite close to the top, so about 0.5 centimeter seam allowance probably. And we're going to do front and back stitch a couple times. 5 centimeters from the top. Yes, okay, so now we can secure this in place and just sew front and back stitch at the start. Once that's sewn securely in place, I'm just going to cut off our excess thread. So now what we want to do is into 3 ruches, and then this just kind of takes a little bit of playing around with, but it can always be tweaked after. But now what I'm going to do is open up the thread or the seam on the inside of my lining and my main fabric for the front top piece, and I'm going to then insert this inside, and after that we can manipulate how we want the bow to look. Roughly looks something like this. Now, so what I'm going to do here, where I've sewn on our bow overlap, is I'm going to lift up our main fabric, and directly parallel to this line here, I'm going to open up the thread. I'm going to open up the seam in front. So now that we've opened that seam there, I'm going to take that bow overlap and I'm going to feed it through the gap here. Make sure the opening that I've made is wide enough so that what you need to do is flip over our bow, pull this through, and then feed this through the top here, through the gap we've opened. There we go. And we can fix the ruching, etc. after. Here we have that coming through. So feed it through the gap there, flip it over, holds it in place here, and then we're going to pin this fully closed here. We're going to re-sew over. Just going to feed it through a little more. So pin this in place here now. So our lining and our main fabric and our bow overlap in between. Before I sew this shut again, I'm just going to flip it over and have a look as to see how it looks on this side. So I'm happy with that now. So I'm going to secure our bow overlap in place here now, and I'm going to sew this seam shut again. Now, perfect. Yes, there we have our overlap secure and it looks very nice and neat. There we go. So that looks lovely so far. Our next step is going to be to close our front and back together. So it'll be flipping it over so that the two good sides are facing each other. And then what we can do is take the two side seams and pin them together. So now I'm just going to sew straight down the side for both sides, and then we'll overlock our seam. Yes, there we have our lovely neat overlocked seam, and we're going to sew the other side shut on this side. Perfect. Now I'm just going to close this seam using my overlocking machine. So there we are. And now I'm just going to try this on for length and see how much I want to hem it and make sure the length is right. But there we are.
Now, so here I'm just testing the length of our baby doll dress over a full outfit, but it looks very well. The next step is going to be to sew our hem.
So I have just folded it up a centimetre and then another centimetre, so 2 centimetres altogether for the hem. And now I'm just going to sew this in place. So I will start here and go all the way along. That is our baby doll dress completely finished, and I'll take a nice video of me wearing it, but I'm so happy with the way it turned out, and it is a very simple design, so very easy for beginners, and I hope you enjoyed watching. And yeah, I want to make it in lots of different colours now.
Now here we have the baby doll dress out in the wild and all finished.